Late spring in Pennsylvania is always a bit of a coin toss. Some years, it's freezing, and others, like this one, it's a muggy mess of rain and humidity. This April had been oddly warm and annoyingly wet. Normally, I'd have my lawnmower out for the first time sometime around early to mid-May. Not this year. The grass was already creeping past my ankles like it had something to prove. But at least it wasn't snowing. This exact week last year, we were hit with a surprise snowstorm that dumped 6 inches across the neighborhood. So yeah, I figured firing up the mower early was a small price to pay for not having to shovel snow in April. Plus, with tax season finally behind me, it felt good to be outside in the sun, even if my allergies were ready to declare war on my sinuses. Our house has a unique layout tone of those little quirks I actually loved when we bought it. The backyard slopes sharply downward into a wooded area with a narrow creek running through. When the place was built, they backfilled the front to bring it level with the road, which left a steep incline midway down the sides of the house. Because of that, our basement, which is completely underground in the front, opens right out to the backyard. I'd had a double-leaf service door installed so I could wheel the lawnmower and garden stuff in and out without junking up the garage. That door might be my favorite part of the whole property. Small victories, right? I just finished mowing. Everything was put away, and my arms were covered in itchy grass clippings. Being allergic to the stuff didn't help, so I was eager to get upstairs and rinse off. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard my wife's voice. Earlier, while mowing the front yard, I'd noticed her best friend's car in the driveway, so hearing voices inside didn't surprise me at first. But then I caught a few of the words, and something in my brain short-circuited. My hand froze on the doorknob. Let me back up for a second. I should probably introduce myself properly. My name is Michael Turner, but most people, especially from back in school still, call me Hogan, a nickname that stuck thanks to a teacher who thought I looked like the guy from Hogan's Heroes. Never mind that the show aired decades before I was born. The name followed me all the way through college and into adulthood. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in accounting and went on to become a CPA as fast as the law would allow. These days, I work as a senior auditor for a large firm in Philadelphia. The job might not be glamorous, but it pays more than well and has given me a front-row seat to the internal operations of dozens of companies. I've got a bit of a knack for forensic accounting, following the money, tracing transactions, sniffing out financial fraud. I've even helped the FBI with a couple of cases, which I like to casually bring up at parties when I want to sound impressive without trying too hard. My wife Emma was a double major in political science and business when we met. It was early in our freshman year. I was sitting in the back row, trying not to sweat through my shirt, when she walked into the lecture hall. She was tall, with that graceful build you only ever see in dancers, delicate but strong. Her long strawberry blonde hair fell loose over her bare shoulders. She wore a sundress that was somehow both modest and completely disarming. And those legs, smooth, athletic, confident. There was this impossible blend of innocence and magnetism about her that stopped me cold. And just like that, I was gone. I hate him more than you ever could. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, letting the silence stretch between us, waiting for her to keep going. I could feel something heavy hanging in the air, something old and raw. Finally, Natalie spoke. He met my mom when she was a college student, she began, her voice softer now. He was a young, ambitious prosecutor in the sex crimes unit in Philly. Mom had come to the U.S. from Ireland after her entire family died in the Londonderry bombing. She wanted a fresh start, some kind of peace. Instead, she met a man who broke her down. Her voice wavered slightly, then steadied. She started dating some guy here, a real piece of garbage. Abusive. Put her in the hospital. That's when she met my father. He was assigned to prosecute the case. Natalie paused and reached into her bag again. This time, she pulled out a small hardcover journal and laid it on my desk. It was thick, decorated with green vines and old floral patterns, something deeply personal. I found this after she died, she said. Her diary. She tapped the cover with her fingers. She was submissive. Emotionally. Sexually. She needed to be taken care of. That loser boyfriend twisted that and nearly killed her. Dad played the hero, got the guy sent to prison, and swept Mom off her feet. A year later, they were married. Her voice went colder. My dad? He got a smart, beautiful, traumatized woman with an exotic accent. She looked perfect on his arm. He was climbing the ladder, and she was the ideal redeemed survivor. She thought she'd finally found a man who would protect her. She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. Then I came along. A few years later, my father decided I was going to be a gymnast. He thought it would look good for his political image, the family man with the Olympic-bound daughter. She gave a tight, bitter smile. You know what happens to most gymnasts? There's a phrase for it. The 3 Bs. Boobs, butts, and boys. That's when their careers end. I hit the first B and got reassigned cheerleading. An all-American girl, Dad's perfect blonde accessory. And I didn't mind at first. I liked performing. She let out a breath, slower now. But by 16, I figured it out. I wasn't a daughter. I was a prop, a campaign ornament. I sat motionless, absorbing every word. Mom knew, you know, from the very beginning, about the cheating. It started almost right after the wedding. She begged him to stop, but he never did. She was trapped. She was Catholic, deeply. Divorce wasn't an option for her. She just endured. She paused again, eyes glossing with something between grief and rage. Sometimes, I wonder if that's why the cancer hit her so hard, like she didn't fight it. Or maybe she just wanted out. I felt the chill of that statement run through me. I was with her when she died, she continued. But the story that made the news was a different one. The official version? Dad had just won a major murder case. The press loved Ithero prosecutor overcomes tragedy. Wife dies peacefully in his arms. Blah, blah, blah. She scoffed. What really happened? He was screwing his assistant, celebrating his courtroom victory in her apartment. When the hospital called, he had the doctor backdate the time of death to cover his ass. Her hands clenched in her lap. He used my mother. Her death was just another part of his image. He'd tell people how they meth out he rescued this poor Irish girl from a monster. What they didn't know was that he became that monster. I finally spoke, the question escaping before I could stop it. Why are you telling me all of this? She met my eyes, dead on. Because you don't deserve this, Hogan. My father, he's not just a man who cheats. He's a predator in a tailored suit. After my mom died, he didn't even try to hide it anymore. Not once I left for college. He started holding meetings at the house late-night work things, fundraisers, charity planning committees. Her lips curled with disgust. I know for a fact he's sleeping with 2 of the women from one of his nonprofit boards. One of them even thinks they're in love. She's getting ready to leave her husband. That's how good he is at this. She paused, her voice dropping into something bitter and dark. Is that what Emma's planning too? She asked. Leaving you once the campaign's over? Once your child's born? Or worse, when she finds out the child isn't even yours? Is that what Emma's planning too? Natalie asked, voice cutting like ice. Leaving you once the campaign's over? Or maybe just staying long enough to pass off someone else's baby as yours? I don't know, I admitted. I understood what I'd heard in my own kitchen, but still part of me needed to hear it again, from someone who wasn't me. You really think she sees this as just fun? Natalie nodded without hesitation. Yeah, she thinks it's exciting. Power's the ultimate aphrodisiac, right? That's what they say, and Emma's living proof of it. She talks to my dad like he's some damn rock star. I even heard her mention a senator they're supposed to meet with next month. She's not planning a future with him, just basking in his glow. The way she said it made my stomach churn. So, what do you want out of this? I asked. Natalie looked me square in the eye, her expression hard, no flinching, no hesitation. I want you to leave her. I want you out of that marriage with that lying, two-faced traitor. And I want my father's career annihilated, torched so thoroughly he couldn't get elected dog catcher in a town full of cats. She said it with such venom that I couldn't help but smirk for a second. And yet, she was completely serious. I thought about just dumping the evidence to the press, she went on. Or slipping it to someone from the opposing party. But he has too many friends, too many strings. It wouldn't stick. They'd bury it. But together, she said, leaning in, we can hit him where it hurts. Make it count. I raised an eyebrow. Won't this mess things up for you? School? Your future? She flipped her auburn hair over her shoulder and shook her head. Number. My mom left me a trust fund. I've never touched it, but if I had to, I could cover the rest of my undergrad, my MBA, and still have something left to live on. This doesn't end my life, it frees it. I hesitated. If your mom had that kind of money, why didn't she leave? She could have taken you and gone back to Ireland. He wouldn't have followed her there. Natalie winced, and something in her face softened again. She was raised Catholic. Divorce wasn't just frowned upon, it was unthinkable. Even after everything he did, she clung to her beliefs, all the way to the end. That's the only reason I don't think she took her own life. Suicide's the ultimate sin in her faith. She wouldn't have done it intentionally, but I'm not sure she fought to survive either. She let out a breath, her expression raw. I think she just let go. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. There was nothing in Natalie's face that suggested manipulation. No angle, no performance. She wasn't using me. If anything, she was just as lost and angry as I, was just better at hiding it behind that sharp tongue and flawless skin. She wanted to ruin her father, and not for petty revenge. This was deeper, personal, old. And now that I had the evidence in my hands, the implications were finally hitting me. If this were a trap, it would have been simpler. Kelly and Andrew could ruin me in court if they wanted to. They didn't need all this cloak and dagger stuff, which meant this was real, messy, desperate, honest. I needed Natalie's help with a few very specific things. If nothing else, it would show me just how committed she was to this. Okay, I said finally, nodding slowly. Let's do it. But I'm not going to go public with some tabloid-style scandal. No revenge porn. No name. Dropping in divorce filings. Natalie blinked. Why not? Her voice rose slightly, her face flushing red with indignation. She was ready to launch into a passionate defense, but I held up a hand. I didn't say we wouldn't destroy him, I said calmly. I said I don't want to deal with the public fallout of being labeled the cuckolded husband in a political scandal. I want to take away the thing he cares about most, this influence. His power, his upward momentum. I leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. Then I can walk away with a clean, quiet divorce, and none of the pity or headlines. Natalie stared at me for a long second. Then, slowly, a sly smile tugged at her lips. What do you need from me? She asked. I grinned. I'm going to do what I do best. Get me access to his financials, personal, campaign-related, all of it. If Capone went down for tax evasion, so can your father. I've met the man. He's arrogant, sloppy, and too confident for his own good. And if you don't find anything? She asked, narrowing her eyes slightly. I smiled again, slower this time. Then I'll make something. Is that what Emma's planning too? Natalie asked, voice cutting like ice. Leaving you once the campaign's over? Or maybe just staying long enough to pass off someone else's baby as yours? I don't know, I admitted. I understood what I'd heard in my own kitchen, but still part of me needed to hear it again, from someone who wasn't me. You really think she sees this as just fun? Natalie nodded without hesitation. Yeah, she thinks it's exciting. Power's the ultimate aphrodisiac, right? That's what they say, and Emma's living proof of it. She talks to my dad like he's some damn rock star. I even heard her mention a senator they're supposed to meet with next month. She's not planning a future with him, just basking in his glow. The way she said it made my stomach churn. So, what do you want out of this? I asked. Natalie looked me square in the eye, her expression hard, no flinching, no hesitation. I want you to leave her. I want you out of that marriage with that lying, two-faced traitor. And I want my father's career annihilated, torched so thoroughly he couldn't get elected dog catcher in a town full of cats. She said it with such venom that I couldn't help but smirk for a second. And yet, she was completely serious. I thought about just dumping the evidence to the press, she went on. Or slipping it to someone from the opposing party. But he has too many friends, too many strings. It wouldn't stick. They'd bury it. But together, she said, leaning in, we can hit him where it hurts. Make it count. I raised an eyebrow. Won't this mess things up for you? School? Your future? She flipped her auburn hair over her shoulder and shook her head. Number. My mom left me a trust fund. I've never touched it, but if I had to, I could cover the rest of my undergrad, my MBA, and still have something left to live on. This doesn't end my life, it frees it. I hesitated. If your mom had that kind of money, why didn't she leave? She could have taken you and gone back to Ireland. He wouldn't have followed her there. Natalie winced, and something in her face softened again. She was raised Catholic. Divorce wasn't just frowned upon, it was unthinkable. Even after everything he did, she clung to her beliefs, all the way to the end. That's the only reason I don't think she took her own life. Suicide's the ultimate sin in her faith. She wouldn't have done it intentionally, but I'm not sure she fought to survive either. She let out a breath, her expression raw. I think she just let go. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. There was nothing in Natalie's face that suggested manipulation. No angle, no performance. She wasn't using me. If anything, she was just as lost and angry as I, was just better at hiding it behind that sharp tongue and flawless skin. She wanted to ruin her father, and not for petty revenge. This was deeper, personal, old. And now that I had the evidence in my hands, the implications were finally hitting me. If this were a trap, it would have been simpler. Kelly and Andrew could ruin me in court if they wanted to. They didn't need all this cloak and dagger stuff, which meant this was real, messy, desperate, honest. I needed Natalie's help with a few very specific things. If nothing else, it would show me just how committed she was to this. Okay, I said finally, nodding slowly. Let's do it. But I'm not going to go public with some tabloid-style scandal. No revenge porn. No name. Dropping in divorce filings. Natalie blinked. Why not? Her voice rose slightly, her face flushing red with indignation. She was ready to launch into a passionate defense, but I held up a hand. I didn't say we wouldn't destroy him, I said calmly. I said I don't want to deal with the public fallout of being labeled the cuckolded husband in a political scandal. I want to take away the thing he cares about most, this influence, his power, his upward momentum. I leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. Then I can walk away with a clean, quiet divorce, and none of the pity or headlines. Natalie stared at me for a long second. Then, slowly, a sly smile tugged at her lips. What do you need from me? She asked. I grinned. I'm going to do what I do best. Get me access to his financials, personal, campaign-related, all of it. If Capone went down for tax evasion, so can your father. I've met the man. He's arrogant, sloppy, and too confident for his own good. And if you don't find anything? She asked, narrowing her eyes slightly. I smiled again, slower this time. Then I'll make something. I get the same feeling from Evans, I said, my voice even but sharp. If he makes it to Washington, it won't take a week before he's seducing starry-eyed interns in pencil skirts. And when the wheels eventually come off his political clown Karen, they will. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near the blast radius, especially not in some overpriced DC hotel. Emma looked at me like I'd just slapped her across the face. She'd heard me rant like this before about corrupt politicians, corporate fraudsters, unethical execs, but I'd never, not once, grouped Andrew Cole in with them. That was new. And the look on her face said she knew it. Maybe I should have held my tongue. Maybe it was reckless to let it out. But honestly, it felt good. For the first time in days, I said what I actually meant. Our marriage was done. I knew that now. Still, part of me wanted her to hear the truth before I walked away completely. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was pride. Or maybe it was just the part of me that still loved her, even if trust was off the table forever. Hogan, she gasped, clearly rattled. That's an awful thing to say about Paul. He's a good man. He's done so much for this district. He's not like that. There was something desperate in her voice, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I didn't say a word. I just stared at her. That's when the sound of a car horn cut through the morning air. She sighed, frustrated, guilty, nervous. She gave me a look I couldn't quite read. It flickered between regret and fear. Then she picked up her bag. I'll be home in 4 days, she said softly, like she wanted to smooth things over. We'll talk more then. But get ready, love. We've got a baby to make. She wrapped her arms around me and kissed me hard, too fast, too fake. But I kissed her back. One last act. Have a good trip, I murmured. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, I said. And I meant it, just not the same way I had before. She stepped to the door, pulled it open, and with her back to me, called over her shoulder. Bye, babe. Goodbye, Emma, I said, and closed the door. Exactly 30 minutes later, I was on a train bound for the city. Natalie and I had an appointment with the FBI. As it turned out, I didn't even need to compile a fancy presentation. Paul Evans' embezzlement tactics, while not completely amateur, were what I'd call moderately clever. Nothing bulletproof. We met at Natalie's off-campus apartment to go over the files she'd pulled from his devices. It was a mess, but an informative one. His methods were standard, unimaginative, but effective. I estimated roughly $2 million had been shuffled into an offshore account, at least based on the transfers we could track. Whether the money was still sitting there? No way to know. Some of the records were incomplete or buried behind dummy corporations. Most of the funds came from small donors. Unremarkable sums. The kind that wouldn't raise red flags with the IRS or campaign auditors. But when I dug deeper into the sources of those donations, that's when it got dark. A handful of them were linked to criminal defendants, people whose charges had been dropped or who had received strangely lenient plea deals, not once or twice, multiple times. It painted a disturbing picture. But Natalisha found the real nuke. Turns out, she wasn't an only child. Her father had 2 more children. One, conceived 3 years before his wife passed away, was the son of one of his office assistants. The other was born 8 months after his wife's death to an 18-year-old volunteer at the hospital where she'd been treated. That alone was enough to make me physically ill. But Evans hadn't stopped there. He paid each woman $2,000 a month in campaign consulting fees, listed as polling research consultants in his finance disclosures. Legal on paper, but laughably obvious once you knew what to look for. Natalie nearly tore her apartment apart when she read those documents. Her fury was volcanic. Her hair, the same bright red that once made her father proud, might as well have been a warning flare. By the time Emma and Andrew arrived in Pittsburgh for their conference, we had already combed through everything Paul had left behind. There were still a few pieces missing, stray gaps in the paper trail, but enough to make a hell of a case. I compiled all my findings into a detailed dossier. And then I scheduled a meeting with the one person who could do something about it, me contact at the FBI. The same senior agent I had worked with once before. The chessboard was set. Now it was time to make the first move. The FBI agent Gary Maddox was someone I'd worked with a few years back out of the Philadelphia field office. Solid guy. Smart, grounded, and sharp as a scalpel. The kind of professional who knew when not to ask the questions he already had answers to. Barbara played her part flawlessly. She told Gary that after finishing a forensic accounting course, she got curious and started looking through her father's campaign reports and financial documents pure academic interest. But when she noticed irregularities, she reached out to me for help, since her father's trusted employee, me wife, was connected to both of us. It was the perfect cover story. Not airtight, but believable enough to avoid scrutiny. Gary didn't press. He wasn't stupid. He knew there was more to the story. but we had wrapped it in a pretty enough bow that he could set it aside and focus on the actual gift, a dirty district attorney, actively campaigning for the U.S. Senate, with mountains of financial red flags and a personal life full of scandal. This was career-making gold. And Gary? He knew it. After we left the office, Barbara called a taxi back to her apartment for a late class, and I walked alone to 30th Street Station to catch the train home. The city buzzed around me, indifferent to everything crashing inside my chest. On the train, I seriously considered packing up my things and disappearing before Emma got home, just leaving a note, ghosting the whole damn mess. But then my phone buzzed. It was her. She said she was calling early because there was a big dinner that night with donors and political allies, and she wouldn't get back to her room until Latif at all. The implication was obvious. Tonight was the farewell party with Andrew. I kept my voice calm and vague, sticking to my well-rehearsed lines. "Everything's fine," I told her. She picked up on my distant tone right away. "What's going on? You sound off." "I had a meeting with some FBI agents today," I said, staring out the train window. "Can't say much about it. Still ongoing. Sensitive." That was all true. I just left out the part where she and her boss were the reason the agents were involved. "It must be serious," she said, sounding both nervous and curious. "It is," I replied and paused. Then I added, "This could turn into a national case once it breaks. Could be all over the news." There was a long silence on her end. "Is it really that big?" she asked, her voice low and intrigued. "Can you tell me anything? Just a little hint?" I should have stayed quiet. I really should have, but the temptation was too much. "Let's just say," I began, "it involves corrupt politicians, bribes, money laundering, sexual misconduct, illegitimate children." I let each word hang in the air like a dagger. There was silence again, a beat longer this time. "Anyone I know?" she asked, trying to make it sound like a joke, but her voice had tightened ever so slightly. I chuckled softly. "I've already said too much. If I go any further, the Bureau might have to shut me down." "Oh, you're no fun," she pouted. "Don't worry, love. Your secret's safe with me." We exchanged goodbyes and hung up. She sounded amused. I was anything but. When I walked through the front door of our house, everything hit me at once. 10 years. A full decade of dating, building, believing, all of it crumbling. I was now, for all intents and purposes, a single man. I sat down on the living room couch, didn't turn on the television, didn't check my phone, just stared out the window and watched the sun drop below the horizon like it was taking my life with it. And I stayed there, watching, numb. It was well past midnight before I finally moved again. By Saturday midday, I'd shaken off the worst of it, or at least pushed it deep enough to function. I wasn't over it, not even close, but I needed to do something or I was going to drown in it. So I mowed the lawn. Again. There was something therapeutic about it. Predictable, mechanical. The noise of the mower helped drown out the noise in my head. That's when I saw Ida's sleek BMW convertible pulling into my driveway. I killed the engine and looked up just as Natalie stepped out of the driver's side. The first thing I saw were her legs long, pale, perfectly sculpted, stretching out from the driver's side of the convertible. Natalie stepped out with the kind of effortless grace that made it impossible not to look. Her sandals laced up around her calves, delicate cords twisting upward like something out of a Grecian fresco. It instantly made me think of those ancient statues goddesses carved in marble, dangerous in their elegance. She wore a pure white dress, toga style, short enough to show just a few extra inches of thigh, thanks to a strip of lace trim that flirted with the hemline. The material was light and silky, nearly translucent in the sunlight, clinging to her body just enough to spark imagination without turning explicit. Her bikini top peeked through underneath, not overly bold, just enough to hint at something wild beneath the poise. Her arms were bare, speckled with light freckles. The dress draped across only one shoulder, leaving the other completely exposed, and her auburn hair flowed in loose waves over it, catching the breeze like it was being styled by nature itself. But it wasn't her dress or hair or curves that got to me. It was her eyes gray-green, sharp and soft at once, and that knowing, unbothered smile. Confident, teasing, honest. She walked toward me while I stood by the mower, still gripping the handle like I was shielding myself. "You look better than I expected," she said as she reached me. "I half thought I'd find you on the edge of the roof, or passed out in a whiskey bottle." I snorted. "Last night? I considered both. The mower's safer." She laughed softly. "We had to do this. And honestly, distractions aren't always bad." "Have you talked to a lawyer yet?" she asked. I nodded, wiping my forehead with the back of my hand. "Yeah, Tuesday morning, before Emma left. The divorce documents will be ready Monday." She tilted her head. "And Austin?" "I'm scheduled to audit a client there. Leaving Tuesday," I said. Normally I'd spend a few days, wrap it up remotely. But this time I'm staying the full 3 weeks. Honestly, maybe it's cowardly, but I just don't want to be here when the fallout starts. Natalie's expression softened, and she nodded slowly. She understood. Hell, better than anyone. "Well, I'm glad you're thinking ahead," she said. "It's what you're good at, strategy." There it was again. That smile. That spark. This woman could disarm a nuclear reactor with just a glance. "Now, it's my turn to plan," she announced. "Here's my deal. I help you finish your stuff here, and then you come hang out with me. We relax. We have fun. You get to stare at me in a swimsuit that will absolutely ruin you." I let out a tired chuckle. "Barbara Natalie, I'm still married." "Legally," she smirked. "Emotionally? Spiritually? Nah, that ship has sailed." I raised a hand. "Look, I'm not ready for whatever that is. Not yet." "You need to blow off some steam," she said matter-of-factly, "before you explode and level a city block." Her voice was playful, but the heat in her eyes made it clear she wasn't just joking. "Besides," she added, "you know what they say, what's good for the goose is good for the goose?" I finished with a crooked smile. "Exactly," she said, grinning with wicked innocence. "Who needs ganders anyway?" I laughed, probably harder than I had in weeks. The insanity of it all, the affair, the evidence, the FBI, the politics, the lease, it all blurred into something surreal. This moment was ridiculous, and yet completely real. And as fate would have it, things were about to get even more absurd. After finishing the yard, I cleaned up and took Natalie out for a late lunch. I wasn't looking for revenge sex, not even close, but I needed air, needed something human, something simple. And being around Natalie's wheat, razor-sharp Natalie, wasn't exactly difficult. As we walked up to the restaurant, I spotted a car parked near the front. Olivia's car. Rachel Fisher. My wife's best friend, the same one who knew all about the affair and never said a damn word. I almost turned around, almost told Natalie we should go somewhere else. But I didn't. Something inside me shifted. Quiet. Sudden. Final. After all my meticulous planning, all my restraint, something broke free. And I let it. The moment I saw Olivia's car parked in front of the restaurant, something flipped immediate, instinctual, and absolutely intentional. I didn't say a word about it to Natalie. I simply wrapped an arm around her waist, pulled her close, and led her through the front door like I owned the place. We were seated after I slipped the host a small tip to place us at a specific table somewhat tucked away, but still perfectly visible to anyone heading to or from the restrooms. I positioned Natalie facing outward, toward the main dining area. I took the seat beside her, not across. She smiled as I took her hand. "This feels deliberate," she said with a mischievous grin. "Should I be flattered or nervous?" I chuckled. "A little of both." She tilted her head. "So, why here? Why now?" "You remember when I told you how I found out Emma was cheating?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Her friend, the one she's been confiding in for months, Olivia? That's her car outside. Natalie blinked. Then her expression twisted into something wicked and amused. She let out a throaty laugh. "Oh my God," she grinned. "So I'm the other woman now? I can live with that." Before I could respond, she leaned forward and kissed me. Soft, playful, not deep, but charged. A kiss with intent. When our food arrived, I realized I was actually enjoying myself. The tension faded. The dark weight of betrayal and planning and counter-planning lifted for a moment, replaced by something light and absurd, and strangely human. Natalie's sense of humor was razor-sharp. Her dry wit made the numbers in forensic audits sound like material for stand-up. She made me laugh until my ribs ached hand when she dropped a suggestive joke about double-entry accounting. I almost choked on my drink. Then I saw Olivia. She was walking back from the restroom, and the second her eyes locked on me and Natalie, her face contorted into something between shock and outrage. I nudged Natalie gently and nodded. "Showtime." "Oh my God," she whispered with a grin, eyes sparkling. "I was so hoping this would happen." She leaned in for another kiss, this one bolder. And just as my hand slid under the table and brushed her thigh soft, smooth, and toned like coiled silk, I heard it. "Hogan, what the actual hell?" Olivia's voice rang out like a fire alarm, drawing half the restaurant's attention. She stormed over, eyes blazing. "Who is this skank? You're screwing around on your wife while she's out of town? I thought you were better than this." I leaned back in my chair, deliberately casual, and released Natalie's leg. "Keep your voice down, Liv," I said coolly. "People are trying to enjoy their lunch." She stared at me like I'd just smacked her with a frozen trout. "What?" she choked out. "Oh, come on," I said, letting sarcasm drip from every word. "Emma's doing the same thing. I'm sure she's having a great time with her boss right now. She's been sleeping with him for months, so I figured it was only fair I returned the favor by seducing his daughter." Natalie, to her credit, didn't flinch. She just bit her lip, clearly holding back laughter. You know?" Olivia stammered. "I know I'm supposed to be the dutiful, clueless husband while my wife gets her thrills with help from someone I thought was my friend." Olivia paled. I leaned in slightly. "Tell me, Liv, was Emma's affair the first, or were there others you helped her hide?" She blinked rapidly, struggling to find words. "Tu didn't know." "No?" I raised an eyebrow. "Thanks for the confirmation." Her mouth fell open, but nothing came out. She stood frozen for a moment before turning on her heel and fleeing the table. A few minutes later, the bell over the front door chimed as Olivia stormed out of the restaurant. Natalie took a sip of her drink and looked at me over the rim of her glass. "Well," she said with a chuckle, "that was fun while it lasted." I couldn't help but laugh. "You're dangerous." She winked. "Only to the deserving." "I really wanted her to stay longer," I said, still watching the door Olivia had stormed through. That expression on her face, it was almost therapeutic. Natalie grinned, leaning in. "She's probably calling your wife right now." "Undoubtedly," I replied. "I give it 5 minutes before my phone lights up like Times Square." "She'll need at least 5 hours to get back from Pittsburgh," Natalie noted. "Plenty of time for dessert, and for you to pack." I chuckled. "Yeah, shame I won't get to see that bikini you mentioned." She laughed again, warm, husky, and deeply amused. "Oh, we'll fix that." Then she leaned in, took a fistful of my shirt, and tugged me slightly toward her. "My semester ends in a week and a half," she whispered, her lips brushing my ear. "I've always wanted to see Austin." The words curled around my spine like heat. Before I could fully register them, her tongue slipped into my ear for just a second, and I nearly dropped my fork. 10 minutes after Olivia's dramatic exit, my phone lit up. Emma, predictably furious. I listened to the first few voicemails as we walked back to the car. Her voice was sharp, angry, climbing into that upper octave that always signaled the start of a meltdown. How could I cheat on her? How dare I humiliate her? I nearly laughed. Really, I almost doubled over in the parking lot. The sheer hypocrisy was too rich. After about an hour of increasingly desperate voicemails and texts, I blocked her number. I knew she'd eventually find a way around it and maybe borrow someone's phone, but she was still 5 hours away on the highway. That bought me time. When I got home, I moved quickly. I packed everything: personal clothes, tech, documents, photos, not just what I needed for my trip to Austin, but the stuff I didn't want left behind. 4 hours after Olivia's scene, I walked out of that house, unsure if I'd ever walk back in again. I booked a hotel near Philadelphia International. Most of my belongings went into storage, at least until I found a long-term place. On the way, I talked to Natalie a few time-short calls while she was walking with a friend. Her father had started leaving unhinged voicemails on her phone now, too. We both knew the chaos was only beginning. I pushed my flight to Austin forward a day and left early Monday morning. Emma called me again, this time from different numbers. The tone had changed. She was crying now, hysterical, demanding to know why I'd do this to her. How dare I ruin her career? How I turned her life into a scandal. Turns out Olivia's outburst had caused some ripple effects. Someone blogged about it, complete with a surprisingly accurate description. They referred to Natalie and me as players, like we were gaming the whole damn system. My comment about Emma having fun with her boss had somehow gotten out, too, and with it, the confirmation that she and Andrew had been in Pittsburgh together that weekend. That little detail stirred the pot in Bucks County and at the DA's office. Big time. I avoided most of the local news, keeping my head down and staying off the radar. But by Friday, a letter reached me in Austin, a formal letter from none other than Margaret Larson. She apologized, said she had no idea how far things had gone. She'd known Paul was seeing 2 women outside the office, but she hadn't known Emma was one of them. And she certainly hadn't realized how deep the betrayal went. She commended me for how I handled it. Using the law to take down a lawyer, she wrote, is a kind of poetic justice. She went on to describe the fallout that week. Apparently, Paul showed up at the DA's office Monday morning, trying to control the narrative. He spun the story that it was all just Natalie acting out a daughter lashing out under the influence of her cheating, unstable husband. It didn't work. By Tuesday, Emma was served with divorce papers, grounds, adultery. Inside the envelope were the photographs, the DVDs, and my letter. Margaret said Emma's scream could be heard from down the hall. She and 2 other staffers rushed into Emma's office, finding her pale and trembling, collapsed in a chair. The contents of the envelope photos of her and Andrew, the security footage screenshots were scattered across her desk. And in that moment, everything became real for her. The lies, the betrayal, the consequences, and worst of all, the fact that I beat her at her own game. With the truth, in the letter I left for Emma, I told her plainly, I wasn't the one having an affair. But now, at least, she might finally understand how it felt, what it was like to be lied to, humiliated, and left behind. I told her I couldn't stay married to someone I couldn't trust. Especially not someone who had proven that betrayal wasn't a mistake, it was a pattern. There was a strange stillness at the DA's office on Tuesday, the calm before the storm. Then came the storm. Margaret had been in Paul's office discussing scheduling and legal staff coverage for the campaign period when 4 men in suits suddenly walked in. Paul, naturally, puffed up and snapped at them for interrupting. He was mid-sentence, full of righteous indignation, when one of them calmly informed him he was under arrest. According to Margaret, the moment the cuffs snapped over his wrists, his brain short-circuited. He didn't speak, didn't argue. Just stood there in stunned silence as they escorted him out straight through the front doors of the courthouse, past a crowd of reporters who had clearly been tipped off. I smiled when I read that part. I owed Gary Maddox a couple beers for that show. Margaret ended her letter with another apology. She was sorry for allowing Paul to conduct himself that way in her office, and sorry I had been caught in the blast radius. She also told me that if I needed anything at all, she would help. Was it damage control? Partly, sure, but mostly, I believed her. Margaret had always struck me as one of the last good smart, moral, principled. Still, so much for a quiet divorce. Thanks to my little scene with Olivia and Natalie at the restaurant, Philadelphia media had picked up the scent fast. Once Paul was arrested, the story caught fire: sex, betrayal, revenge, and high-stakes politics. A real summer blockbuster in the making. Every news outlet that could squeeze a headline out of it jumped in. The 24-hour cycle was starving, and we fed it a gourmet scandal. Thankfully, I'd taken precautions. I was out of town and nearly impossible to trace. I'd booked a second hotel 10 miles from the one listed on my company travelogue, and that's where I stayed. Still, reporters camped out in front of both, just in case. I saw the footage on TV. Journalists lined up outside my house, cameras aimed at the front porch. Emma never showed. Only my bewildered relatives made appearances, dodging microphones and shaking their heads at the madness. But no one had it harder than Natalie. She became the media's favorite contradiction. The dutiful daughter turned whistleblower. The red-haired beauty who destroyed her father's career. She still had classes to attend and exams to finish. And for the first few days, the press had a field day catching her on campus. Eventually, the university cracked down and forced the media off school grounds, citing student privacy and academic disruption. The story exploded again when two more women came forward, both mothers of Paul's illegitimate children. Each gave dramatic interviews, milking their 15 minutes of fame with tabloid-worthy flair. After her final exam, Natalie quietly slipped away, boarding a flight out of the city. She didn't even show up for graduation. The media were disappointed, but not surprised. She'd had her finale. And eventually, the story cooled. It faded into a side column, then into blog archives, and finally into the endless churn of political gossip. The real climax came during Paul's trial. He pleaded guilty to several federal charges. His lawyers negotiated a deal to avoid further embarrassment. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Thanks to the plea deal, Natalie and I weren't called to testify. No courtroom drama, no public spectacle. Just a headline, a gavel drop, and then quiet. With Paul's fall from grace complete, the spotlight moved on. And with it, so did the noise around me, Emma, and Natalie. Oddly enough, after everything, after all the press and betrayal and chaos, divorce went through quickly and cleanly. No fights, no drawn-out court sessions. Emma signed the papers just 4 days after receiving them. A few days after she signed the divorce papers, I received a letter from Emma. It wasn't long, just 2 pages, but every word felt like it had been written with trembling hands and a heart full of regret. She apologized for what she did to me and to us, said she had come home from Pittsburgh furious, ready to confront me for cheating on her. She was livid until she opened the envelope, until she saw the photos, the footage, the cold facts laid bare, until she realized she was the only one who had been unfaithful. That realization shattered whatever narrative she had been clinging to, and it forced her to acknowledge what I already knew, that she had been a hypocrite. That what she'd done wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice, one she made over and over. In the end, she accepted my offer of a clean 50-50th split. No contest, no fight. She just asked for one thing, that someday, when the dust settled, when everything wasn't so raw, I'd agree to meet her, just once, so she could apologize in person. She ended the letter by saying she would always love me, and she wished me peace. Not happiness, not redemption, just peace. I later found out from her mother that she had resigned from the DA's office and moved out to the Midwest to live with her aunt. No fanfare, no big exit. She just vanished from the map like a ghost trying to outrun her past. As for me, well, it turned out that bringing down Andrew Cole did wonders for my career. The FBI gave me full credit for analyzing the data. Publicly, I stayed quiet. Privately, I was told that my work played a key role in locking the case down. Since I was ducking the press, I threw myself into my job harder than ever. And in Austin, where I was supposed to be decompressing from emotional annihilation, I ended up finding not just the embezzler my firm was after, but another one no one had even suspected. By the time I got back to Philly, my bosses promoted me. Head of the white-collar crime analysis team. And yes, some smartass in HR decided to nickname us Hogan's Heroes. I didn't even fight it. But the real bonus came when they assigned me an assistant, a recent college grad who wanted to break into forensic accounting. She was sharp, quick, curious, and way too young to know how dangerous she looked in business casual. And let's just say, her bikini looked even better on the floor of my hotel room than it did in the pool. Funny how things work out. So yeah, subscribe to the channel, because if you think this story was insane, wait until you hear the next one. Just, if you're under 18, don't even think about pressing play. I was hit with instant, overpowering lust the moment I saw her. That kind of punch-in-the-gut attraction that shuts down rational thought. The worst part? Emma wasn't even sitting near me, and she wasn't assigned to my group project either. Total cosmic injustice. It took me 4 agonizing weeks to finally build up the courage to talk to her. When I did, I blurted out some idiotic joke honestly. I can't even remember what it was, but she laughed, not a polite giggle. A full, head-thrown back, unapologetic laugh. That laugh made something inside me snap into place. We started talking, and after a few minutes of stumbling through basic small talk, I asked if she wanted to grab coffee after class. She smiled like she'd been waiting for the moment all semester. "I've been wondering when you'd ask," she said, her eyes twinkling. From that day on, we were pretty much inseparable. The last 2 years of undergrad, we were rarely apart for more than a few hours. Our parents weren't thrilled 2 overly attached college kids playing house, but by our senior year, we'd moved in together. And after some initial hesitation, our families eventually accepted that this wasn't just a fling. We were serious. We were building something real. I didn't think life could get any better, but somehow, it did. I landed a job right out of school at one of the top accounting firms in Philadelphia. The pay was almost absurd for a 22-year-old. Meanwhile, Emma had been accepted to Penn Law. We stayed in our little off-campus apartment while she began her law school journey, and I started climbing the corporate ladder. My company even covered my MBA tuition, so I figured, why not? I juggled work and evening classes, commuting by SEPTA so we didn't need a second car. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. We were building our future. 3 years later, Emma graduated law school with honors. I proposed to her over a candlelit birthday dinner at Morton's Steakhouse in Rittenhouse Square. 6 months later, we were married. Emma took a job as an assistant district attorney in Bucks County, just north of the city. We decided to buy a house in Doylestown. It had the courthouse, great schools, and the regional rail line ended there, which meant I could keep commuting by train instead of dealing with the nightmare that is the Schuylkill Expressway, or I-95. The drive would have killed me. Emma and her mom found the perfect starter home. 3 bedrooms, some of which we turned into a dual home office since we both occasionally worked remotely. 1 guest room, and of course, the master bedroom. It was also just a few blocks from her parents, which Emma framed as a built-in nanny option for when we eventually had kids. Strategic thinking, very Emma. I was an only child, always wanted siblings, and we'd been talking about having a family since college. But we'd agreed to wait until Emma had solid footing in her career. Now, finally, we were there. Just 2 nights ago, we'd stood in the bathroom brushing my teeth, her sitting on the counter, and agreed to stop the birth control. We were ready. I felt like I was floating ever since. And then I heard it. I was standing on the stairs, my hand still hovering near the doorknob, when Emma's voice floated up from the kitchen. "Hogan and I decided it's time for me to get pregnant," she said, giddy. Her best friend, Rachel Watkins, squealed so loud it could have shattered glass. They both made this high-pitched screeching sound that reminded me of whales stranding themselves on the Jersey shore. From where I stood, frozen just out of sight, I actually grinned. Their excitement mirrored mine. I couldn't wait to be a dad. But as I reached for the doorknob again, pen in hand, the next thing I heard made my blood go cold. Then came the question that wiped the grin clean off my face and stripped away every ounce of happiness with it. "This is amazing, Em," Rachel said with a giddy laugh. "But what are you going to do about Andrew?" The floor fell out from under me. "Shh," Emma whispered sharply. "Hogan's still outside mowing the lawn." There was a pause. I could picture her peeking around, making sure I wasn't standing right behind the door. I was, just out of sight, frozen. "I already told Andrew I'm ending the affair," she said in a calm, almost businesslike tone. He didn't seem to care. Once Grossman steps down from the Senate, Andrew thinks he's got a real shot at the seat. Getting caught sleeping with a married employee? Yeah, that wouldn't play well. 3 sentences, just 3, and my entire world imploded. Andrew Cole, Emma's boss, the DA himself, a widower in his early 40s, left raising his daughter, Natalie, after his wife passed away from breast cancer. Emma used to tell me stories about his political maneuvering, how strategic he was, how connected, how focused. Now I knew how she got all those inside details. I felt like I was burning from the inside out. "Wait, seriously?" Rachel asked, her voice full of mock doubt. "Just like that? Cold turkey? You've been hot and heavy with him for 6 months, and now you're just walking away?" Her tone was light, teasing, playful, and it made me want to walk in and throw a chair through the window. Rachel and I had known each other before Emma and I even started dating. I thought of her as my friend. Turns out, that illusion died right along with my trust in Emma. "Oh, stop it," Emma said, giggling. "You're terrible." There was a pause, and then she continued, "Andrew's a great lover, very dominant, very intense. But it was just fun. It was rough, raw. It wasn't love. It never was. Hogan is the one I love. And now that we're starting a family, I want to do things right. I'm going to be a good wife, a faithful mom. That's it." I nearly laughed. "Faithful? After screwing your boss for half a year?" I stood there, paralyzed, my fingers still lightly brushing the doorknob. My ears roared with the sound of my heartbeat, hammering in rhythm with the rage building inside me. All I needed now for the full cliché package was to come home early one day and find a strange car in the driveway and the 2 of them in my bed. That would tie it all up with a neat little bow. "So, cold turkey?" Rachel asked again, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Well, not exactly," Emma admitted, laughing softly. "We have that conference in Pittsburgh next week. We figured we'd make it our little farewell party. One last night together. After that, it's all about Hogan and the baby." I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to move. My legs finally unlocked. I started stomping up the steps, loud enough to warn them, loud enough to play my part. I opened the door and stepped into the kitchen. Emma and Rachel were sitting at the table, sipping tea. Emma glanced up, and I swear there was a flicker of guilt in her eyes, but it vanished almost instantly. "Hey, babe," she said, voice soft with concern. "You okay?" That's when I realized there were tears on my face. "Allergies," I muttered. "It's gonna be a rough spring." She stood and came over. "Why don't you go take a shower? Just throw your clothes in the hallway. I'll toss them in the wash so they don't mess up your closet. I picked up that Claritin D you like," she added casually. "It's in the cabinet." "Thanks," I mumbled. And I headed up the stairs like a man underwater numb, slow and quietly breaking apart. "Thanks," I managed to say, heading up the stairs with all the weight of the world pressing down on me. I needed time to think, to breathe, to not explode. The next morning was Monday, and I used the excuse of an early meeting to get out of the house before Emma even stirred. The night before, I had claimed my allergies were acting up again and disappeared into bed early. The truth was, I couldn't bear to be in the same room with her, not with everything screaming inside my head. Now I sat on the commuter train into Philly, watching trees blur past the window while my mind spun in circles. Yes, she cheated. That much was painfully clear. But from what I'd overheard, it was just sex, and now she was done. Ready to recommit, to have a child, to be the loving wife and mother she kept saying she wanted to be. To some people, maybe that would have been enough. Water under the bridge, a temporary lapse, now corrected. Be grateful, they'd say. She chose you in the end. But there was a voice in my head quieter than my heartbreak, colder than my grief, that whispered something different. If she did it once, what makes you think she won't do it again? What happens in 10 years, when the kids are in school and the marriage hits another rut, another rough patch, another exciting colleague, another just sex affair? And then what? Divorce? Custody battles? Child support payments bigger than most people's rent? Me living in a crappy one-bedroom while Emma keeps the house and the kids? I couldn't go down that road. As an accountant and, more importantly, as a forensic analyst, I always thought in terms of risk versus reward. And the truth was, my trust in Emma had been shattered beyond repair. The "it didn't mean anything" excuse completely ignored the real damage. Not the sex, not even the lies, but the lack of respect. Because people only sneak around and hide things when they know they're hurting someone. If she'd come to me, told me she had feelings for someone else, wanted to explore something, well, I would have been crushed, sure, but at least there would have been honesty, dignity, a modicum of respect. Instead, she slept with her boss behind my back for half a year and smiled in my face while we planned a family. I sat at my desk later that morning, going through reports and balance sheets like nothing had changed. But of course, everything had. Part of my brain kept working like clockwork, checking numbers, reviewing audit flags, but the rest was stuck on one track. What now? I had no physical proof, no texts, no photos, nothing but a conversation I overheard through a half-closed door. And in the 6 months she was apparently sleeping with Andrew Cole, she'd never once slipped up. Never came home smelling like someone else. Never acted cold. Never once gave me a reason to doubt her. If I confronted her now, with nothing to back it up, she'd deny everything. And so would Andrew. Worse, he had connections, judges, lawyers, half the county political elite in his pocket. If I made this public without concrete proof, I'd be the one who ended up ruined. And Emma? She'd play the betrayed wife card so convincingly that I'd look like the villain. I even thought about just leaving, packing a bag, starting fresh somewhere else. But the house was a financial anchor. She couldn't cover the mortgage on her salary alone. We'd barely built up any equity. She'd have to sell it immediately or face foreclosure. In today's market, that would be a disaster for both our credit scores. And for a CPA like me, bad credit was more than inconvenient. It was a death sentence. Who's going to trust a man with corporate audits if he can't even manage his own finances? I couldn't afford to act on emotion. I needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof. Without it, I was just another paranoid husband with a grudge. If I could have acted then, if I had even a sliver of evidence, I would have made my move. But the proof I needed came from the last place I ever expected. 3 days passed. I kept my emotions in check, wore my game face, went through the motions. But every spare moment was spent looking for anything that could confirm what I'd overheard. Emma's personal laptop? Spotless. Not a single email out of place. No secret accounts, no shady message threads. I even checked her cloud backups and browser history. Nothing. I searched our bedroom for any signed Snow lingerie stuffed in the back of the closet. No unexplained receipts from hotels or upscale restaurants. No missing hours that didn't line up with her calendar. It was maddening. She was too careful, too clean, and I was stuck in this purgatory of doubt. Then, like some sick joke, Emma called me at work. "Andrew's throwing a political announcement party Friday night," she said casually. "We've been invited." Of course we had. I assumed this was going to be his official announcement that he was running for the U.S. Senate. It would be packed with reporters, donors, and anyone who wanted a piece of the next rising star. And Emma? She'd be standing there, radiant and loyal, the golden employee. I briefly considered making a public scene, something explosive and final. But without proof, It would only make me look unstable, bitter, delusional. Damn it. Friday night arrived. We pulled up to Evans's estate just outside Washington Crossing. It was ridiculous, practically a mansion, with a small horse farm rolling out behind it like something out of a politician's dream. A giant white tent stood on the lawn, glowing from inside with lights and laughter. And there he was, Andrew Cole himself standing at the front of the reception line like he was royalty. Widowed king, visionary, all-American public servant. Since he had no wife to play the part of charming hostess, he brought in the next best thing, his 21-year-old daughter, Natalie. She stood beside him, greeting guests with all the poise and polish of someone raised on photo ops. When we reached the front, Cole's smile stretched wide the second he saw Emma. "Emma, you made it!" he beamed, leaning in to kiss her cheek like a proud uncle. Proud uncles wanted to sleep with their nieces. Then he turned to me. "Michael, good to see you again. I'd be completely lost without your wife. But I guess I'll have to let her go soon, huh? Once you start growing that family of yours." He laughed, a little too loud, like it was the cleverest joke in the world. "Just pass her back to me when you're done. No hard feelings." Laughter echoed around us. Emma blushed and smiled nervously, and every cell in my body screamed at me to put my fist through his teeth. But I didn't. I kept my face blank, my tone dry. "Who knows what the future holds," I said, the way I might report an audit discrepancy in a quarterly review flat, detached, surgical. Cole's smile faltered for just a second. Emma nudged me with her elbow and whispered, "You're being rude." He moved on to the next guests with his politician's ease, leaving us to be greeted by the real star of the Knit This daughter. Now, I'm not proud of this, but even through the red haze of rage clouding my vision, I couldn't help but notice her. Natalie Cole was stunning. Where Emma had the refined elegance of a ballet dancer, Natalie had the full-throttle presence of a swimsuit model. Auburn hair, bright, confident smile. Curves in all the right places, wrapped in a designer dress that made photographers drool and dads sweat. She looked like she was born for a magazine cover. Andrew Cole had built the perfect campaign narrative. Tragic widower, sainted late wife, beautiful, intelligent daughter studying law. A triple threat of sympathy, legacy, and photogenic appeal. Nobody would dare go after him. Attacking Andrew Cole meant attacking the memory of his dead wife, the innocence of his daughter, and the image of a man who'd sacrificed everything for public service. He had crafted his armor perfectly, and for the first time that night, I realized just how dangerous he really was. Natalie, as it turned out, was no ordinary college kid. According to Emma, she was a double major in business and law at Penn State. A former gymnast turned cheerleader, and now, just having turned 21, she was planning to audition for the Eagles cheer squad at the next open tryout. It made sense. With his saintly, departed wife and his brilliant, photogenic daughter, Andrew Cole was the media's dream candidate. The grieving single father, rising from tragedy. The devoted family man, the man of the people. He'd be gold on the campaign trail. "Michael," Natalie said, eyes lighting up as she practically bounced over. Before I could even process what was happening, she threw her arms around me. This wasn't a polite hug. This was a full-body, wrap-you-up-and-squeeze kind of hug. Every soft and perfect part of her pressed up against me like we were old lovers, not strangers. "You look amazing," she said, pulling back slightly but keeping her hands on my arms. "No wonder Emma keeps you hidden away. You never come to these parties. You work way too hard. It's bad for your health, you know." She said all of that in a single breath, flashing a smile so blinding it could have melted the tent poles. And just like that, my rage flickered momentarily, replaced by sheer confusion. My brain struggled to reboot. I mumbled something polite, told her she looked incredible, which was a gross understatement, and was about to step away when two things hit me. First, she never once greeted Emma. Second, what parties? I didn't get a chance to ask. Emma jumped in to hug Natalie and ushered us forward so the next couple in line could move through. But the question stuck in my head. Later, After I poured Emma a drink and we stood off to the side, I asked casually, "What did Natalie mean by parties? Are there other get-togethers here you haven't mentioned?" Emma just laughed, shaking her head. "She's messing with you, little brat. Paul hosts work stuff here, sometimes strategy meetings, team planning, that sort of thing. He says he thinks better with a drink in his hand." She leaned in and added, "You never know who's in the next booth at a bar, right? At least here, it's private. Natalie was around a few times when classes were canceled. Don't tell anyone, but Paul let her drink here before she turned 21. It was meant to sound harmless, but in my mind, something twisted. So that's where it happened, right here, in this house, under the pretense of team meetings. And maybe they really were meetings at first. Maybe she stayed late to help him clean up. Maybe she left with the rest of the team and then circled back once the coast was clear. His wife was dead, his daughter often away at school. He didn't need to sneak into hotels or worry about credit card charges. He had privacy, secrecy. And now, a perfectly loyal and ambitious employee who could blend right in. "She goes to the meetings too?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "No," Emma said quickly, brushing it off. "She was just home a few times when we met here. She's just teasing her dad, joking about him throwing parties on the taxpayer's dime." She squeezed my hand. "Come on, honey. Buy your young wife a drink." For the next hour, she didn't leave my side. We mingled, made small talk with her coworkers, sipped wine under the white tent canopy. People congratulated us on trying for a baby. A few even looked sad that Emma would be stepping away for a while. It was strange, embarrassing, even. Why did everyone know so much about our family planning? Did she announce it at work like a press release? About an hour later, the music lowered and a soft chime rang out across the tent. Andrew Cole stepped forward, his daughter glowing beside him. He thanked everyone for coming, then launched into his speech, officially announcing his candidacy for the United States Senate. No one was surprised, but everyone still clapped like it was the second coming. A local news editor stood near the front, scribbling furiously in a notepad. A photographer clicked away in the background. Tomorrow's front page practically wrote itself. And somewhere in the middle of it all, while Emma smiled and clapped beside me like the perfect, supportive wife, I stood there thinking, "You're clapping for the man you're still sleeping with. And none of them have any idea. Not yet. You really nailed the concepts," I remarked, trying to keep my tone casual, though I meant every word. Natalie's cheeks flushed a soft pink at the compliment. For a second, the polished, almost too perfect image faded, and I saw something real, young woman, not a political accessory, who was genuinely touched that someone saw more in her than a headline or a last name. "I've actually been thinking about applying to the FBI once I graduate," she said, brushing her hair behind one ear. "But Dad wants me to either go to law school or work at one of his friends' firms. Political legacy crap." "Well," I said, and this was the honest truth, "you should follow your own path, not your father's. Believe me, I'm all for ruining that man's plans." She laughed, a little surprised by my bluntness, and I smirked. I wasn't kidding. "I've worked with the Bureau before," I added. "Sometimes our audits turn up criminal activity. Money laundering, fraud, you name it. The agents I dealt with, sharp as hell." Before Natalie could respond, a voice sliced through the shadows like a knife dipped in fake sweetness. "So this is where you disappeared to," Emma said with a teasing lilt. I turned my head and saw her standing nearby, arms crossed but smiling as if the sight of me chatting with Natalie was just amusing nothing more. "You two weren't doing anything scandalous, were you?" she added playfully. Natalie beamed and spun around toward my wife. "We were just talking about Michael's work. I'm studying forensic accounting this semester, and I wanted a real expert's opinion." "Well, Hogan's definitely that," Emma said, eyes twinkling with what looked like pride. "I remember this one Caseian employee was embezzling money using their supervisor's login. Hogan figured out that the transactions happened while the supervisor was out of town, but the logins were coming from the corporate office. Anyone else would have stopped once they identified the boss as the user. but not my husband. He kept digging until there was no doubt. The prosecutor had almost nothing left to prove in court. Hogan had already done all the work. She smiled up at me, genuine affection on her face. And I stood there, utterly bewildered. How could she look at me like that with love, admiration, and still have been screwing her boss for the last 6 months? Did she even hear herself? Did she not feel the contradiction? Or worse, did she think it didn't matter? A flicker of something, maybe confusion or pain, must have crossed my face, because Emma's smile faded a touch. "What is it, babe?" "Nothing," I said, recovering quickly. "Just thinking about that case again. How close we were to missing it." "Well, stop thinking," she chided with mock sternness. "You're at a party, not an audit." Before I could respond, she launched into a new topic, excitement bubbling in her voice. "Hogan, you'll never guess the opportunity Paul and Margaret gave me. Since I'll be going on maternity leave once we get pregnant, they've asked me to take on some transitional admin work. I'll be working directly with Margaret, making sure everything's in order before I step away." For half a second, my chest lightened. She'd be away from Andrew. Maybe this was a real clean break. Then came the gut punch. "I'll need to travel a bit too," she continued. "I'll be delivering campaign documents to Paul on the road. I won't be in the campaign, of course, but I'll still get to see the behind-the-scenes action. It's going to be so exciting." I felt something inside me crack. Again. She said she ended the affair, that it was over, but now she'd be back on the campaign trail with him. Hotels, private meetings, no supervision. And if she did get pregnant, who's to say the baby would even be mine? Andrew was about my size. Same build, same general coloring. It wouldn't be hard to pass off his child as mine, not unless I insisted on a DNA test. My hands were clenched into fists in my pockets. My rage burned hot in my chest, but I pushed it down. This wasn't the time. Not yet. Natalie turned and asked Emma something about the upcoming campaign events, and just like that, they were off and talking, laughing, chatting, completely absorbed in each other. I stood there, forgotten, and honestly, I was fine with that. I needed the space to collect myself, to think. After tonight, the planning would begin. I didn't know how I'd do it, not yet, but I had to find a way to take Andrew down without blowing up my own life in the process. 2 days later, the answer walked into my office. "Your 4 o'clock is here," my assistant called from the doorway. I glanced at my Outlook calendar blank. No meeting scheduled at 4 o'clock. I was about to ask what was going on when the door opened, and in walked Natalie Cole. "Hey, Hogan," she said with a casual smile. I froze for a second. Her long auburn hair spilled over her shoulders like a shampoo commercial come to life. She was wearing a light sundress that fluttered around her thighs and strappy sandals that wrapped up her legs almost to her knees. The top of the dress was modest technically. No cleavage, nothing overt, but the way the fabric pressed against her chest, the way her skin seemed to glow under the office lights. It was more than suggestive. It was deliberate, and yet, somehow, it didn't feel calculated, just natural. "I hope you don't mind," she said, walking in like she owned the place. "I told your assistant, Mary, that we had a meeting about my career and about Emma working for my dad." She closed the door behind her without asking. My pulse jumped. I stood politely. "It's fine. I was just working on some reports," I said, motioning toward the chair in front of my desk. She sat, legs crossed, perfectly poised. I took the seat opposite her. "So, what did you want to talk about?" The playful smile on her face faded almost instantly. Her whole demeanor shifted. Whatever she'd come here to say, it wasn't small talk. "I think you already know," she said quietly. "I saw your face when you talked to my father at the party. I'm really sorry. He's ruining a good man." Her words hit like a hammer. I sat up straighter. "What are you talking about?" She hesitated, just for a beat. Then she dropped the bomb. "My father," she said, voice flat. "He's having an affair with your wife." I leaned back in my chair, stunned. Not because it was news God knows I'd been tormented by that reality for days, but because of how simply, how clearly she said it. "Did you just find out?" she asked softly. I nodded once, feeling like I'd swallowed broken glass. "I'm really sorry," she said again. "I found out about 3 months ago." That got my attention. "I don't know when it started," she continued, "but I came home early one Friday in February. Dad told me they had a team meeting at our place. I'd been out with a friend for lunch, just dropping off my stuff and saying a quick hello before heading back out. He asked what time I'd be home, and I told him, after dinner." She paused, looking down for a moment before continuing. "My friend ended up canceling, got sick, so I went home early. When I got there, they were in the jacuzzi, having sex." I stared at her, jaw tight, breath shallow. "There was a foot of snow on the ground," she said with a bitter laugh. "I filmed them, took pictures too, and later, I caught them running naked back into the house." "You took photos?" I asked, both shocked and God help me relieved. "Of your father? Having sex?" I didn't mean to sound accusatory. I was just trying to process it all. She nodded. "Yeah, and videos. He had security cameras installed around the house, exterior and a few interior rooms too. If you know the URL, the key fob access, and the admin password, you can get into the footage from anywhere. It's all here." She reached into her bag and pulled out a large manila envelope. She placed it on my desk like it was a peace offering or a loaded gun. "There are photos from that day and a few others," she said, "and a flash drive with the best footage. It's everything." I stared at the envelope. That was it. All the proof I'd been searching for, gift-wrapped by the last person I expected. "Why?" I asked finally. "Why are you doing this?" Natalie's face, once sorrowful, hardened into something else, anger, something deeper. "Because," she said quietly, "I hate him, probably more than you ever could."